By the end of this video, you will know 13 specific ways to make someone who hates you completely powerless without ever raising your voice, sending an angry text, or giving them the fight they're hoping for. Picture this. Someone talks about you behind your back, tries to embarrass you in a meeting, or spends months trying to get a reaction out of you, and you just don't give it to them. Not because you're weak, because you've quietly taken away the only thing they were ever fighting for. Here's the part nobody tells you. Most people who try to win against an enemy end up losing something far more valuable than the argument. And later in this video, I'll show you exactly what that is and why the obvious way to fight back almost always backfires. For now, drop the word silent in the comments if you've ever wanted to respond to someone and chose not to. Think about the last time someone got under your skin. Maybe it was a coworker who takes credit for your work in front of your boss. Maybe it's a sibling who still treats you like you're 12 years old at every family dinner. Maybe it's an ex who can't resist one more jab dressed up as a joke. You feel your jaw tighten. Your thumbs hover over the keyboard, already drafting the reply that will finally shut them up. And here's what actually happens next, almost every single time. You send it, you feel a flash of relief, and then for the rest of the day, sometimes the rest of the week, they live in your head rent-free. They didn't even have to do anything else. You did the work of ruining your own day for them. That's the quiet tax. Nobody talks about the hours of sleep lost rehearsing comebacks, the energy drained from your actual life, the version of you that shows up to your job, your kids, your own thoughts, a little smaller because someone who doesn't even respect you gets to occupy that much real estate in your mind. And it's not just the big blow-ups. It's the small ones that quietly stack up over a week, the passive-aggressive email you reread 4 times, the group chat message you know was aimed at you even though your name wasn't in it, the family member who brings up your worst decade at every single holiday like it's a tradition now. None of these are dramatic on their own. That's exactly why they work. Nobody notices the slow leak. They just notice eventually that they're running on empty and can't quite say why. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who spent much of his life surrounded by people trying to undermine him, wrote to himself constantly about this exact trap. His idea, stripped of the old language, was simple. The people who wrong you can only truly harm you if you let their behavior become your behavior. The insult doesn't wound you, your reaction to it does. He wasn't saying pretend it doesn't happen. He was saying stop handing your enemies the remote control to your own mind. So here's the central idea for this entire video, the one habit that everything else builds on. Real power over an enemy comes from becoming unreachable, not from becoming victorious. This does not mean rolling over. It does not mean letting people walk on you, staying silent when you need to set a boundary, or pretending cruelty is fine because you're above it. Stoicism was never about being a doormat. The Stoics served as soldiers, senators, and advisors in the most brutal political environment in the ancient world. What this means is that your energy, your attention, and your emotional reactions become resources you spend deliberately, not ones that get pickpocketed by anyone who knows which buttons to push. Compare that to what modern culture rewards: the clapback, the perfectly worded takedown, the public call-out that gets you likes for one afternoon. That behavior feels like winning. It is actually the fastest way to hand your opponent exactly what they wanted: your attention, your emotion, proof that they still control you. The quietest person in the room, the one who never took the bait, is usually the one who actually walks away untouched. Think about the people you actually admire for how they handle conflict. It's rarely the loudest person in the room. It's the person who didn't need to raise their voice to win the room's respect anyway. The coworker who let their work speak instead of their comeback. The friend who quietly stopped explaining themselves to people who'd already made up their minds. That's not an accident of personality. It's a set of specific, repeatable choices, and that's exactly what the next 13 sections are going to hand you. Let's get into the 13 specific ways to do this, starting simple and building toward the ones almost nobody has the discipline to actually use. The first way is the easiest to understand and the hardest to remember in the moment. Stop feeding information to people who use it against you. Think of the coworker who asks casual questions about your plans, your relationships, your insecurities, then repeats it all with a smirk 2 weeks later at exactly the wrong moment. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and later became one of the most influential teachers in Rome, taught his students to treat their inner life like property. With a locked gate, you decide who gets access, and access is a privilege you can revoke at any time. This connects to something psychologists call the disclosure liking effect. We tend to trust people simply because we've shared personal information with them, even when they've given us no real reason to deserve that trust. Enemies exploit this instinct constantly, drawing out details with friendly small talk, then weaponizing what you handed them for free. The reframe here is that going quiet around someone who hasn't earned your openness isn't coldness, it's basic self-preservation, no different than locking your front door in a neighborhood where someone's already tried the handle. Starting today, notice one person in your life who consistently uses what you tell them against you, and simply stop offering new material. Answer questions with less. Watch how much less power they suddenly have. The second way is to stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided their version of the story. You know the scenario: someone spreads a slightly twisted version of something you did, and your first instinct is to corner them, or corner everyone around them, and set the record straight. Seneca, writing to a friend about handling insults, made the point that chasing down every false rumor is like trying to outrun your own shadow. The faster you move, the more attention you draw to the very thing you're trying to escape. There's a psychological trap operating here too, something close to the illusory truth effect, where repeating a claim, even to deny it, makes it feel more familiar and more believable to anyone listening, regardless of whether it's true. Every time you defend yourself loudly to someone who wasn't going to believe you anyway, you're rehearsing their narrative for them. The reframe: silence isn't an admission of guilt, it's a refusal to participate in a trial you never agreed to enter. The people who actually know you don't need the explanation, and the people who don't know you were never going to accept it. Today, pick one rumor or misunderstanding you've been dying to correct, and consciously choose to let it sit unanswered for one full week. Just watch what happens to your own stress level. You'll notice something strange happen around day 3. The urgency you felt on day 1, the burning need to set the record straight before it gets worse, starts to fade on its own, simply because you stopped feeding it new energy. Most conflicts don't actually escalate because of what the other person does next. They escalate because both sides keep showing up to argue about them. Remove yourself from that loop even once, and you'll start to see how much of the drama was being generated by your own participation in it, not theirs. Here's a quick question for you, and I want you to actually sit with it for a second. How much of your week right now is being scripted by someone else's opinion of you? Because that's what we're really dismantling here, one habit at a time. The third way is to let people underestimate you on purpose. This one feels almost unnatural because our instinct is to correct anyone who doubts our ability, our intelligence, our worth. Picture a rival at work who assumes you're not a threat for the promotion, who talks over you in meetings assuming you have nothing valuable to add. Every part of you wants to prove them wrong immediately, loudly in the room. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the opinion of others is not his to control, and not worth the price of chasing what mattered was doing the work itself well, regardless of who noticed. This lines up with something researchers call the spotlight effect, our tendency to wildly overestimate how much other people are actually paying attention to us and judging our every move. The truth is, almost nobody is thinking about your reputation as much as you are, including the person trying to provoke you. The reframe here is that being underestimated is not humiliation, it's camouflage. And camouflage is one of the oldest advantages there is. Let people miscalculate you. Starting today, resist the urge to correct someone's low opinion out loud, and instead let your results do that work later when you're not even in the room to see their face change. The fourth way, and this is where things start to get sharper, is refusing to react in the exact moment you're provoked. Somebody says something designed to sting in a group chat, at a family dinner, in front of your boss, and there's a physical window, usually just a few seconds, where your body wants to fire back before your mind has even caught up. The Stoics called this the space between the impression and the assent, the gap between something happening to you and you deciding what it means and how to respond to it. Seneca described anger specifically as a kind of temporary madness, powerful and fast, but short-lived if you can simply survive the first wave without acting on it. This maps directly onto something modern psychology calls the amygdala hijack, where the emotional, reactive part of your brain takes over before the slower, more rational part gets a chance to weigh in, and almost every message you'll ever regret sending was written during that hijack, not after it passed. The reframe is that pausing isn't cowardice, it's simply waiting for your smarter brain to show up to the meeting. A concrete action. The next time you feel that hot flash of anger at a provocation, physically put your phone down or step out of the room for 60 seconds before you respond to anything. That's it. 60 seconds. It will feel unbearable the first few times. It works anyway. The fifth way is learning to separate what's actually yours from what was never yours to begin with. This is one of the oldest Stoic ideas there is, and it's easy to say and brutally hard to live. Someone's opinion of you, their mood, their choice to be cruel, their need to compete with you, none of that belongs to you no matter how much it lands on your doorstep. What belongs to you is your own effort, your own honesty, your own choices in response. Epictetus opened his most famous teaching with exactly this line. Some things are within our control and some things are not, and almost all human misery comes from confusing the two. Psychologically, this overlaps with what's called an internal versus external locus of control. People who believe their well-being depends on things outside their control, like other people's approval, report significantly more anxiety and helplessness than people who anchor their sense of stability in their own actions. Here's the counterintuitive part, though. The part most people skip right past. This isn't about not caring. It's about correctly identifying what you're actually allowed to be upset about. You're allowed to be upset about how you responded. You are never required to be upset about something that was always someone else's to own. Today, take one thing that's been eating at you and ask a single question: was this actually mine to control? If the honest answer is no, you're allowed to set it down. Try this with something small first, because the skill has to be built before you can use it on the things that really matter. Someone cuts you off in traffic, not yours to control. Only your response is. A friend cancels plans for the third time, their choice, not yours, though how you address it with them absolutely is. The muscle you're training here isn't indifference, it's precision. Most people spread their concern evenly across everything that touches their life, which means everything gets a little bit of their energy and nothing gets enough. The people who seem unusually calm under pressure aren't calm about everything. They've just gotten ruthlessly accurate about what's actually worth their concern in the first place. If you've made it this far, you already think differently than most people watching a video with this title. Most people click on something like this, hoping for a clever comeback, and instead you're building something that actually lasts. Do me one favor before we go further. Hit like on this video right now. It genuinely helps this reach more people who need to hear it. And remember that open loop from the very beginning about why fighting back the obvious way usually backfires. We're about to get right into that, because the next few sections are where this whole framework flips. The sixth way is outlasting people through sheer patience, because most conflicts that feel urgent right now are not actually urgent at all. They only feel that way because you're standing too close to them. Think about a legal dispute, a messy breakup, or a feud with a business partner, where every day feels like it demands an immediate, forceful response. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire that was constantly under threat from plagues, wars, and betrayals from his own inner circle, wrote often about the passage of time itself as a kind of quiet justice, that most storms, given enough time, simply exhaust themselves without your help. There's a concept in psychology called temporal discounting, our brain's tendency to wildly overvalue immediate relief over long-term outcomes, which is exactly why settling this today so often feels more urgent than it actually is. The reframe: patience isn't passivity, it's positioning. The person who can wait the longest almost always ends up with more leverage than the person who needed resolution first. A concrete step you can take today. Whatever conflict currently feels like it needs an answer this week, ask yourself honestly whether it actually does, or whether that urgency is just discomfort dressed up as deadline. The seventh way is turning every attack into training instead of injury. This is where the idea of amor fati comes in: loving your fate, not despite the obstacles, but including them. Imagine someone deliberately trying to sabotage your reputation at work, spreading doubt about your competence to anyone who listens. The instinct is to see this purely as damage. The Stoic move, one the philosopher Marcus Aurelius returned to constantly, was to treat every obstacle as material, literally fuel for becoming sharper, calmer, more capable, rather than as pure loss. This connects to what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, the well-documented pattern where people who face genuine adversity often emerge with greater resilience, clarity, and capability than before, not because the adversity was good, but because how they metabolized it mattered more than the event itself. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Your enemy thinks they're hurting you. What they're actually doing, if you let them, is training you for a version of yourself that can survive far worse than them. Today, take the most recent attack against you and write down one specific skill or strength it forced you to develop. That skill is yours now. They gave it to you for free. This is genuinely strange to sit with the first time you do it, because it means the person who tried to damage you accidentally handed you something they'll never get to take back. They wanted you smaller. You came out sharper instead. Not because the attack was secretly a gift, it wasn't, and pretending otherwise is its own kind of dishonesty, but because you refuse to let it be only a loss. That refusal is the entire skill. The eighth way is protecting your attention like it's the most valuable currency you own, because it is. Every minute you spend checking whether they've posted something, rehearsing what you'd say if you ran into them, refreshing a conversation to see if they've replied, that's attention leaving your actual life and flowing directly into theirs. Seneca wrote extensively about how life feels short, mainly because we waste so much of it on things that don't deserve the time, not because we're actually given too little of it. There's a concept called opportunity cost that applies with brutal precision here. Every hour spent thinking about someone who's hurt you is an hour that didn't go toward your work, your relationships, your own peace, and invisible bill you pay without ever seeing the receipt. The reframe is simple but sharp. You don't have to forgive someone to stop paying them rent in your mind. You just have to stop opening the door. Starting today, notice the specific moments you catch yourself thinking about this person unprompted. And in that exact instant, redirect your attention to something, anything that's actually yours. Here's the counterintuitive part I promised you earlier. The one most people who want revenge don't actually want to hear. The version of winning. You've been imagining the perfect comeback, the public embarrassment, the moment they finally realize how wrong they were about you. That version requires you to keep caring about their opinion just as much as you did when they first hurt you. You cannot defeat someone in their own game without still playing it. Real detachment doesn't feel like victory in the moment. It feels like boredom. It feels like genuinely, structurally not caring anymore, and that is so much more devastating to someone who was hoping to matter to you than any argument you could ever win. The ninth way is becoming so good at what you do that their opinion becomes irrelevant by default, not by force. Picture a sibling who spent years telling you that you'll never amount to much, or a former boss who passed you over and made sure you knew why. The temptation is to seek out one specific moment of proving them wrong to their face. Marcus Aurelius took a different approach entirely. He focused almost obsessively on the quality of his own actions, treating excellence as its own reward, regardless of whether the people who doubted him ever witnessed the outcome. This lines up with self-determination theory, which shows that people sustain motivation far longer, and with far more satisfaction, when it's driven by internal standards rather than the need to prove something to an external audience. The revenge-driven version of ambition tends to collapse the moment the audience looks away. The reframe: build your competence for you, not for the moment you get to shove it in someone's face, because chasing that moment quietly keeps you tethered to them for years. A concrete action. Pick one skill related to whatever they doubted about you and commit to improving it for the next 30 days. Not to prove anything to them, but because it makes your actual life better regardless of whether they ever find out. Here's what usually happens to people who skip this step and go straight for the confrontation instead. They get their moment, the argument, the promotion announcement, the proof, and it feels incredible for about a day. Then the high fades because the goal was never actually the skill or the achievement, it was the other person's face when they saw it. And once that moment passes, they're right back to needing the next one and the one after that, forever chasing a finish line that keeps moving because it was never really about them in the first place. Build the competence for reasons that don't expire the second the audience looks away, and the achievement stays yours long after anyone stops watching. The 10th way is releasing the emotional charge while keeping the practical memory fully intact, and these are two completely different things that people constantly confuse. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, was never about deciding someone deserves a second chance or forgetting what they did. Epictetus made a sharp distinction between the person and their actions. You can understand that someone acted out of their own ignorance, weakness, or fear, without owing them access to your life ever again. Psychologically, this echoes cognitive dissonance theory. Carrying both intense resentment and daily proximity to someone creates a constant internal friction that drains you, whereas releasing the emotional charge while still keeping clear, practical boundaries resolves that friction without requiring you to trust them again. The reframe. Letting go of the anger is not the same as letting them back in. You can wish someone well from a distance you never intend to close. Today, write down, privately, one sentence releasing the emotional weight of what happened, and one separate sentence naming the boundary that stays permanently in place. Keep both. The 11th way is letting your calm function as a mirror rather than a shield. This is subtler than it sounds. When someone is spiraling, provoking, escalating, and you remain completely steady, something strange happens. They start to see their own behavior reflected back at them with nowhere to hide it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about meeting cruelty with a kind of unbothered fairness, not because the other person deserved kindness, but because his own character wasn't something he was willing to let anyone else dictate. There's a well-documented pattern in psychology called emotional contagion, where people unconsciously mirror the emotional intensity of whoever they're interacting with, but the reverse is also true, and a genuinely regulated, calm presence can be just as contagious as chaos, often unraveling someone's aggression faster than matching it ever could. The reframe. You don't need to point out their behavior. Your stillness does that automatically, and it's far more uncomfortable for them than anything you could say. A concrete step. The next time someone tries to escalate a conversation, deliberately lower your voice and slow your pace instead of matching their energy, and watch what it does to the temperature of the room. This one takes practice, because your nervous system's default setting is to match intensity, not diffuse it. That's a survival instinct, not a character flaw. The first few times you try this, it will feel almost dishonest, like you're suppressing something you should be expressing. You're not. You're simply choosing which version of the interaction gets to exist. Escalation always needs two participants to keep climbing. The moment one person stops climbing, the whole exchange has nowhere left to go but down. The 12th way, and we're getting close to the sharpest one now, is refusing to confirm their story about who you are, no matter how many times they repeat it. This is different from ignoring rumors. This is about your own internal narrative. When someone calls you difficult or dramatic or not good enough, often enough, there's real pressure to start living inside that description, either by rebelling loudly against it or quietly believing it. Seneca warned against letting other people's careless words become the architecture of your own self-image, noting that most insults say far more about the person throwing them than the person receiving them. This connects to something called the looking glass self, a concept describing how much of our identity gets built from how we imagine others perceive us, which means someone repeating a false story about you enough times can genuinely start to shape how you see yourself if you let it go unchecked. The reframe. Their description of you is data about them, not a verdict about you. And you are under no obligation to audition for a role you never agreed to play. Today, name one label someone's tried to pin on you and consciously write the true sentence that replaces it, not to prove them wrong to their face, but to make sure it's your voice, not theirs, narrating your own life. And the 13th way, the sharpest one, the one almost nobody actually has the discipline to sustain. Stop needing them to lose. Read that again, because it's not what it sounds like. Every technique so far has still, in some quiet corner, been about your enemy outlasting them, outcalming them, out-succeeding them. The final and most complete form of this entire idea is the moment you no longer measure your life against theirs at all. Marcus Aurelius, in the private notebook he never intended anyone else to read, kept circling back to the same idea from different angles, that a well-lived life doesn't require witnesses, doesn't require a scoreboard, doesn't require the specific satisfaction of someone else's downfall to feel complete. This is the deepest form of what psychologists call self-concept clarity, a stable sense of who you are that doesn't fluctuate based on comparison to anyone else, which research consistently links to lower anxiety and higher life satisfaction than identities built on comparison. The reframe, the one that ties this whole video together. You were never actually trying to destroy them. You were trying to reach a place where their existence simply stopped being relevant to your peace. That's not a consolation prize. That is the entire war, won in a single sentence. And here's the paradox, the one this entire video has been building toward from the very first sentence. You cannot get there by trying to win against them. Every method we've covered, the silence, the patience, the withheld information, the redirected attention, all of it fails the moment it's driven by the hope that they'll finally notice, finally suffer, finally regret it. The moment your calm is a performance for their benefit, it's not calm anymore, it's just a slower, quieter fight, and they can still feel that you're fighting it. Real detachment can't be aimed at anyone. It only works when you stop building it as a weapon and start building it as a life. The people who actually walk away untouched by their enemies are the ones who stop checking whether the enemy noticed they'd walked away at all. That's the twist nobody tells you when they promise you 13 ways to destroy someone without lifting a finger. The real destruction isn't something that happens to them. It's the disappearance of their power over you. And that disappearance only becomes permanent the moment you genuinely stop needing them to witness it. Picture what this actually looks like 6 months from now, a year from now, once this becomes who you are instead of something you're practicing. You wake up, and the first thought in your head is your own day, not their last message, not what they said about you, not a rehearsed comeback for a fight that isn't even happening anymore. You walk into rooms where they're standing and your shoulders don't tighten. You hear their name and it lands like any other name, flat, unremarkable, no static in your chest. Someone brings up the old conflict, expecting you to still be raw, and you realize with genuine surprise that you have almost nothing left to say about it. Not because you're suppressing it, but because it simply isn't taking up space anymore. The world doesn't get gentler. People don't stop testing you, provoking you, trying to pull a reaction out of you for their own reasons. What changes is that none of it reaches the parts of you that actually matter. You respond when it's useful. You stay silent when it isn't. And for the first time in longer than you can remember, your peace isn't something you have to defend, it's just where you live now. You notice it in the smallest moments. Someone brings up a conflict expecting you to flinch, and instead you're already thinking about something else entirely: dinner, a project you're proud of, a person you actually love. You catch yourself laughing at something unrelated in the middle of a day that, a year ago, would have been consumed start to finish by a single person's opinion of you. Old friends notice it before you do. They'll mention how different you seem, steadier, harder to rattle, and you'll realize you can't even remember the last time you rehearsed an argument in the shower. That's not numbness. That's what it actually feels like when something finally stops having power over you. So here's your challenge, starting today for the next 7 days. Every single time you feel the pull to react, explain, prove, or perform for someone who's wronged you, pause for 60 full seconds before you do anything at all. Just 60 seconds. Notice what's still true once the heat passes. Track how many times across the week you catch that impulse before it catches you. Write the number down somewhere you'll actually see it again, not to grade yourself, but because most people never realize how many times a day they hand their peace away until they start counting. Because if there's one line to take from everything we've covered today, let it be this. You don't destroy your enemy by defeating them, you destroy their power by outgrowing your need for the fight entirely. If this video actually shifted something for you, type the word unreachable in the comments right now, because I read every single one and I want to know exactly how many of you are done handing your peace to people who never deserved it. And if you want more of this Stoic philosophy translated into something you can actually use on a Tuesday, subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly that. Thank you for watching all the way to the very end. Stay unreachable.